They're careful to
Mr.
Hausman,
Mr. Hausman, we've had complaints from other guests of you talking very loudly. Mr. Hausman, open up.
Hey, sorry. Did I have my stereo turned up too loud? I was just listening to the latest show. No Vacancy with Glenn Hausman.
Okay, well, keep it down, please, okay?
All right, here's the thing. I will, but only if you promise to listen to the show each and every week.
Okay, sure. I guess I'll check it out.
Gets a new listener every time.
Do you live, eat, and sleep the hotel industry? Looking to brush up on your game? You've come to the right place. Welcome to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the No Vacancy podcast. As you know, I'm excited and delighted to have you here each and every week joining me on this fun and exciting adventure that we're taking together. Man, it's been over 2 years now that we've been doing this show, and I'm just so excited by how much we're picking up steam right now, how many people are reaching out to me and saying how much they're enjoying the show and what they're learning from it, and taking all of the information that we have and turn it into practical insight that they can empower themselves, they can empower their business, they can empower their careers. And that's what this is really all about. And if you want me or my guests to talk about any particular topics, feel free to reach out to me. Just drop me a line, glenn@rouse.media. That's the home for the No Vacancy podcast. And of course, check out novacancynews.com. And if you're a first-time listener, I urge you to subscribe to the show wherever finer podcasts are found. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, all those kind of places. Just type in No Vacancy with Glenn Hausman, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get our show each and every week. But if you really want to get on board, make sure you text the word hotel to 66866, and you'll get our Sunday night newsletter. That's hotel to 66866. And of course, this show wouldn't be possible without the fine folks at Duetto, the revenue strategy technology platform thousands of hotels are using to make more money. I want you guys right now to go to getrevenueresults.com. That's getrevenueresults.com, because they've got a great video on how management teams can collaborate and make more money. It's a great video taking real life examples about how different disparate parts of the organization are just trying to make it work, to get the best price, to get the best amount of people in their hotel at once, but they're lost in a world of spreadsheets, disconnected strategies, and poor communication because they lack the right technology. You'll find out when they commit to a revenue optimization strategy how important that will be and how their lives are going to change with their jobs in ways that you never imagined. So check that video out, getrevenueresults.com. Pretty entertaining, pretty fun. Also, thanks Red Roof for being a good sponsor here at the show. We really appreciate it. You'll hear more from them during our commercial break. And if you haven't listened to our tech show, man, we're about halfway through our 10-show run right now. You're going to want to check that out now. It's on the No Vacancy feed, so just go, subscribe to No Vacancy Podcast. You'll get access to those shows. You're going to learn a ton from them. Our most recent shows, where one was on predictive marketing, pretty cool stuff that you're going to need to know to be more successful. On the next couple of weeks, we got a brand new hotel design show launching. That's going to be a 20-episode series in the first season. Super stoked about that. And coming August 1st, 2018, checking in with Anthony and Glenn. That's where I'm partnering with Travel Channel's Anthony Melchiori to bring you a show several times a week that we're going to talk about so many cool things that you guys are going to love. I can't wait to share that show with you. Oh, it's only a week away at this point. So exciting. And if you're feeling generous, check out patreon.com/novacancy. Give me a couple of bucks. Why not? Couldn't hurt. You know what? You're drinking too much coffee anyway. Cut back on those fancy Starbucks drinks. Have a regular coffee. Send me a few bucks. I'd really appreciate it. Woo, that was exhausting. All of that shameless self-promotion. Let's bring in our guest, and I'm going to welcome Mr. Andrew Hazelton. He's managing director of the AETHOS Consulting Group. And what I love about this is he's going to teach us about chief commercial officers and why they're so important. Andrew, welcome aboard, man.
Glenn, appreciate having you. Thank you so much, and big fan of the show. So thank you once again for giving me this platform.
Yeah, I really appreciate you calling in today to speak to me about this. I find this really interesting, and for all of you listeners out there, we're going to get to the bottom of what this is all about. Because honestly, before I got this article that you had written that we decided to turn into a fun-filled podcast right now, what is a chief commercial officer, and why are they so important to making a company successful? But before we do that, Andrew, I think usually I save this shameless plugs at the end, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what AETHOS Consulting Group is to help set the stage to understand what this conversation is going to be all about and where your expertise comes from?
Happy to do so, Glenn. Happy to do so. AETHOS Consulting Group, we are a global hospitality advisory firm serving the hotel, restaurant, casino, cruise line, club, and travel technology sectors. Our firm's core services include executive search, comm consulting, organizational development, and psychometric assessment. We also have a number of strategic joint ventures, if you will, where we can point our clients for further advice outside of our core competencies. We're designed as a single partnership. We're truly global. We operate across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, and truly have the ability to service our clients on a global scale.
Wow, it's pretty cool. Well, thanks for being here today, to share your groove with us. So I want to know all about this chief commercial officer thing. I feel like I've heard the term chief commercial officer, but I'm sitting here scratching my head going, what exactly is it, and why is this so important and into our industry, and why are we seeing more and more of these types of individuals taking on this particular role within organizations around the world?
Yeah, the Chief Commercial Officer, or CCO, is a relatively new position in the C-suite that's become more and more present in our industry over the last 5 years or so. An organization's Chief Commercial Officer really become, let's call, the keeper of its customer-facing and revenue-generating functions. And having been given responsibility for 4 major verticals: sales, revenue and distribution, e-commerce, as well as brand and marketing communications. By moving away from, let's call it, traditional structure, where both sales and marketing functions are bifurcated, we're seeing a trend where organizations instead are bringing those functions together under a single point of leadership to ultimately make their businesses more efficient, as well as to help guide an organization as to how to best deliver on their brand and their brand's message.
Oh, I get it. So it's kind of like they're the captain of the brand. They're making sure that all the messaging is aligned and all of the strategy is aligned when having outward facing communications. Is that a fair way to put it out there?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, an organization's commercial services leader is, their new strategist or external spokesman that a CEO, their leadership teams are leaning on, so the company, can best interface with their customers and drive that growth, if you will.
Interesting. All right, cool. So why do you think people are finally, or I should say, let me switch that. Why do you think this is only coming to the fore now? Is this something that has been recently discovered, invented, or is it something that's been kind of lurking in the shadows for a lot of years and now just suddenly coming into the mainstream consciousness?
Great question. And I believe it stems from hospitality organizations simply evolving their leadership structures to best serve their businesses and ultimately their consumers. Because we are in such a high-touch, customer-centric industry, that only makes sense to have a knowledgeable strategic leader really orchestrating the customer-facing and revenue-generating components of their business. It's used to be, for example, that your first touch point with your consumer was when he arrived at the hotel or the restaurant. But now with technology, social media, you connect with your customer way before they walk through the door. And let's face it.
Interesting.
Let's face it, specifically as it relates to the hotel industry, there are a lot of options. There are more than enough brands to go around. Plus, you need that leader who is constantly thinking about how your brand stands out and how to best service your customers.
Oh, so essentially then what we're talking about is major hotel companies and management groups are starting to think more consciously about what we call that customer journey. From that first idea that, hey, I'm a customer, I want to travel, to all the way making that decision through the stay experience, through the post-stay communication. So the chief commercial officer is a good match for being able to, connect better with this new style of trying to work with the customer throughout that entire journey, as opposed to just focusing in that one time. Does that make sense to you, or am I just blathering like a fool?
No, that makes sense. The chief commercial officer is really connecting all those dots to best reach out and connect with, if you will, their customer base and really helping guide their organizations, their leadership teams to do so. So you are spot on, my friend.
Okay, so how are they guiding and leading the teams and pulling all of these things together? Because I'm still finding, and I'm not saying that companies with chief commercial officers are doing this, but I am finding that disconnect sometimes between different divisions within an organization. And I find that they wind up spending a lot of extra time and money and stepping on each other's toes or just not being aligned and in sync with what each of the different divisions are doing. So how does this play out practically in the real world within a hospitality organization?
No, great question. And I think practically, undoubtedly, an organization's commercial leader, chief commercial officer, regardless of what the title is, if you will, they're ideally well-versed in all facets of the commercial side of the business. And, they have the ability to really help kind of orchestrate, lead, and guide all those key functions, sales, marketing, e-commerce, brand and communication, to really help kind of hone and guide that message for their leadership teams to get that message out, if you will. So it's really a matter of having the right leader in place, if you will, to do so. And don't get me wrong, we're early in the evolution of the chief commercial officer. It's still a relatively new role within the C-suite, so it's not as if every organization is adopting this strategy, but
right.
For the ones that are, it seems to be working.
Okay, so the ones that are, it seems to be working. It's got to work in a significant kind of way to rationalize whatever salary comes along with that particular position, which, people are getting paid more these days, especially people that have the word chief in their title. So, what do you say to companies that are a little bit nervous about taking this step and, in theory, adding another layer of management?
No, that's a great question, and it needs to make business sense for the organization. And for some organizations, it may not make business sense. But in my opinion, it does make good business sense to have that leader, if you will, really honing all those commercial services components for the organization. He or she doesn't need to be a chief commercial officer. They don't necessarily have to be, this C-suite executive, but I believe there needs to be someone in the organization that can really, that the executive team can lean on, if you will, to help guide, all these facets of the business that are so important, specifically in such a high-touch, consumer-driven environment.
Well, what about the idea of now bringing in that type of person? How would you go about it strategically? Because if you are adding someone in between layers of the organization, I could imagine that there are some people that'll feel ruffled, like maybe they're not as valuable, maybe that they aren't feeling as appreciated with the organization, and they could be also concerned about their ability to grow their careers as well with that particular organization. So while it sounds like a great idea, I think you have to implement this type of strategy and individual in a way that makes sense. So the long way of getting around to this question is, how do you do that?
Great question. And I don't think that this necessarily has to be an adversarial hire, if you will.
Right, agreed.
I really feel that it could be either someone who...
I'm just coming at you, Andrew, from a person who's super insecure. I got picked last for that kickball team in second grade. I'm still reeling with that feeling. So that's how I would personally approach it. Oh, I'm not good enough. And then I go home and cry to my mom. But, so what's the best way to implement this person without making sure people feel that they're still loved and cherished within the organization?
Look, I think a couple things. One, the reality is any leadership team is going to want what's best for the organization. And if this, from a strategic standpoint, is best for the organization, to my comment earlier, it shouldn't be an adversarial hire. It should really be just adding another executive who can really be just another individual in their arsenal, if you will, to really help drive, the success of their business. And ultimately, which is the most important thing, because we're in a consumer-driven environment, is really do what's best for their customers.
Yeah, all right, makes a lot of sense. So now there's one thing you wrote this article that's been I've seen popping up along the way, and you say this one term that I've never heard before, which is psychometric assessment. What's a psychometric assessment, and what does this have to do with chief commercial officers? Because I'm not too bright. I need a little help here.
Right. Well, why don't I give you a quick overview of our psychometric assessment and kind of give you a sense of what it is, if you will. All
right. That would be good, but please don't use words with more than 2 syllables. I'm not sure I'll understand, okay?
So one of the core services we provide are psychometric assessments, and our proprietary assessment is 2020 skills. It's an assessment that we created with the help of Cornell University that's used in our executive search as well as our workplace psychology advisory work. It's different from most assessments used in HR because it's not a personality test, and that's important.
Right.
Instead, ours measures a person's motivations, attitudes, and current skills as they relate to 3 drivers of performance. Execution skills, or how someone goes about their work, people skills, or how someone relates to others through the organization, and then the most critical, which is cognitive skills, or how someone thinks about information, sets priorities, and makes decisions or solve problems. So it's really amazing how far assessments and the science of psychometrics have come with new technologies combined with computer science. I mean, long gone are the days of personality tests, if you will. This is a true indicator of performance, if you will.
Right. All right. That makes sense. So that's all important because you want to make sure whenever you're investing in a new person within the organization that they're going to perform to the highest standards that you have and be able to problem solve in smart and intelligent ways that have some sort of ability to pull disparate facts from all over the place in order to create something that makes more sense. So what are the traits that are most important to have for a chief commercial officer's likelihood of being successful within that role?
Great question. And look, from our experience, undoubtedly your chief commercial officer will be well-versed from a skill set perspective in all facets of the commercial side of the business, have the business acumen to develop strategic initiatives, and drive and orchestrate across those brands. But what we did was we took it a step further, if you will, and looked at an aggregated 2020 skills profiles for an elite sample of superstar chief commercial officers to see how they were scoring when it came to execution, people, and cognitive skills. The result was essentially this data-driven success profile, if you will. And after looking at the data, we found that effective chief commercial officers tend to be strong generalists across those 3 drivers of performance, as well as be very, very versatile. So what we found is they have very high sense of service orientation, very strong analytically, numeric problem solving, as well as they're grounded in servant-minded leadership. Thus, those who define personal success as their ability to make others successful. They're also self-driven, strategic individuals who've got a good capacity for team building and sensitivity to diversity and respect for others. So, there's a lot that goes into being a quote-unquote successful chief commercial officer, having those traits. But what's really worth noting is that a chief commercial officer's profile mirrors that of an effective chief executive officer, because they too have strong generous skill sets and they have a decisively strategic acumen.
All right. So I'm just putting this all together in my brain here. So if they're very much like the chief executive officer, then are they also kind of like that COO who I also thought was kind of like the chief executive officer? And if so, how are those 2 positions really different?
I would say that a chief commercial officer is probably more, and today is kind of more tailored toward a CEO because they are more of a generalist, if you will, where a chief operating officer, essentially has, although they have focus on a number of functions, they really are the keeper of quote unquote operations, where a chief commercial officer is really a keeper of a number of of verticals of functions within an organization, if you will. You know, so they have to be more of a generalist. They have to be, you know, they have to really be able to orchestrate. I believe I've used the word a couple times now, but really orchestrate across, you know, different functions within the organization.
Okay, so now you had talked about the chief commercial officer breaks down some of those silos to create, you know, something under one banner. So how does that then compare to what the COO is doing, and is there overlap between the two positions at all? How do you envision companies playing that out?
Well, I think that the two positions, although like any smart executive team, leadership team, they're communicating, they're working hand in hand. You know, the difference really being, and it's somewhat self-explanatory, where you know your chief operating officer is really handling you know operation initiatives, you know, the day-to-day, you know, where your chief commercial officer is handling, you know, sales, marketing, distribution, e-commerce. But all those intertwine, because at the end of the day, you know, I believe I stated earlier, on the operations side and the commercial side, you're both touching you know, it's both a touch point to your customers. So they very much need to work together for the organization to be successful.
Yeah, because that's basically, I think, what you're saying, that they are, you know, two sides of the opposite sides of the same page, would you say? I don't know, I'm making up that phrase maybe. I feel like I'm getting that out of somewhere, but I feel like they're complementary positions that, when together, working in concert, they could really rise the success of the organization throughout.
Exactly. I still think, once again, we're kind of early in the evolution of a chief commercial officer. Historically, the chief operating officer has been seen as the right hand to the CEO. Right. In this case, in this kind of slow trend, we're almost seeing two right hands to the CEO.
Interesting. So maybe a right hand and a left hand, so that way everyone feels, you know,
there you go.
Comfortable.
There you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right.
There you go. There you go.
I feel sorry for all these companies with CEOs that have no hands, but you know, we'll work on that for another show. All right. So obviously we're talking about something that we're really in the early stages of development for this new position. It's not something that's really widely held. So, you know, what percentage of companies, in your experience, do you estimate are incorporating chief commercial officers? And then following on that, where is this all going to head to? Where is this going to go with regards to the C-suite?
Yeah, and I don't have an exact data figure.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to, but I have to ask the hard questions there, Andrew, you know, because this is hardcore journalism right now.
Understood. And my answer is, I mean, it's still a fairly small percentage, if you will, of organizations having a chief commercial officer or a VP of commercial services. But that is still, you know, that there still is going to continue to be an uptick, if you will. So I guess to the second part of your question, you know, what's next? You know, what's the future, if you will, of the chief commercial officer? I do think that organizations will continue to onboard the strategy as our business continues to evolve. I do feel that, you know, as we talked about earlier, you know, the chief operating officer, you know, is seen as historically as the right hand to the CEO. I believe that's going to continue to morph and change to become the chief commercial officer as being that right hand. And I do think that, you know, with time, maybe over the next 5 years or so, we're going to see an increase number of chief commercial officers move into a CEO or president role. Historically, like I said, the CEO's been, you know, come from either the operations side and or the finance side of the business. But I do believe that a trend will continue to morph, if you will, and we will see that.
Yeah, well, this is definitely fascinating. So now, when it comes to the compensation, are they at this point being compensated with the same type of package that a COO would normally be getting?
Yeah, I mean, they are historically, or they have been recently compensated, you know, as any quote unquote C-suite individual should be. So I would say that, you know, their compensation is probably closer to a chief marketing officer or chief sales officer, or chief revenue officer. But Yes, so they are paid well, to say the least.
Good. Well, good. I'm just thinking about a career change right now because this sounds pretty tempting.
Okay, there you go. No. You'd be great. You'd be great.
Thanks. All right. So, one more question in regards to this, Andrew. If I'm interested, if this is my company and I'm flirting with the idea of putting in a chief operating officer, what's the best way to do it? Now, I know I asked you earlier about the personality issues and how it affects the employees, but as a CEO, what do you need to think about in order to be successful with creating this position and then getting it off and running?
Oh, great question. I think that, first and foremost, obviously you look in-house to see kind of what your current state of the union is for your organization's commercial strategy, and obviously see if there's potentially, ways to fill that role internally. But then, so Glenn, can we stop?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. No problem. All right. So let me just write down the number.
I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. I told you, fail-safe free zone, buddy. No worries.
That's a great question. I guess I felt I was fumbling. So
it's all good. Are you ready to start over? I'm gonna.
Let me
take a deep breath.
Give me a minute.
Find your moment of zen.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, I will. I'm going to tee it up by clapping loudly, so that way my editor knows where the break is. Okay.
Okay, hold on. Can you give me a minute to just think about this question?
As a matter of fact, I'm going to hit pause on the recording. All right. Okay, so I feel like we've got a pretty good story here, Andrew, but is there something I have been remiss that I should have asked you about a chief commercial officer in the C-suite within a hospitality organization?
No, Glenn, I appreciate you providing me the platform, if you will, to discuss this. Like I said, I feel that this is an interesting trend, thus the article, and something we'll continue to see more of. But feel we've done a good job covering it today.
Yeah, I think so too. But I got to say, Andrew, while I got you on the line, I have to ask you a couple of other questions because, at Ethos, we're all about placing people within organizations. And we are in a very interesting time right now in the hospitality sphere. Nationwide employment seems to be at full employment when we're under 4% here. But I think also in the hospitality industry in particular, as we've moved to become firmly from a manufacturing economy or towards a service economy, folks that have the skill set in the C-suite are becoming more important than ever and in more command and demand than ever. What is that doing to their overall salaries, and how much are we seeing C-suite people in the hotel universe moving around from company to company in middle of 2018?
Glenn, can you stop recording? I totally hate to do this to you.
Yep.
I lost you.
Okay, so while I have you here on the microphone, I want to ask you about some of the other hiring trends we're seeing out there, Andrew, because right now, at least the way I see it, is that, the United States seems to be near full employment with under 4%. I mean, that's literally pretty much full employment the way that we discuss these things. Plus, we've moved from a manufacturing to a service economy, which is making jobs in the hospitality industry even, there's much more of them, which means there's less people to fill them theoretically, and people within the C-suite, as my hunch, are becoming more in demand. It's more likely they're going to want to switch at this point in the hospitality cycle from one company to another. So what kind of trends are you seeing out there in regards to hiring within the hospitality industry? Is my observation right? Is my observation wrong? What do you assess things at?
No, I think that with every cycle there are hiring trends. There are roles that, if you will, seem to be more desired than others. If you look back over the last couple of years, revenue management, asset management, as well as other commercial service type roles have definitely been hot, both at the C-suite as well as at the director and property level, if you will.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, there is a lot of competition out there. Our industry is doing very, very well. I'm sure you were at NYU, and walking away from NYU, you felt the energy, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And I still feel that energy is moving on as the year moves on. And the one way that I feel that employers can best kind of combat all of that competition, if you will, is really focus in on employee engagement, making their employees feel satisfied, making their employees feel as they have a voice within their organization and are a part of a team, driving a brand's voice. I think that's extremely critical in this time where, once again, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of options for individuals to go within our hospitality space.
Yeah, there sure are. So how do you make sure that your employees are engaged? Because we could just say you need to engage employees, but could you give me an example or two of how to really make people feel they're valued within the organization to such a point that they'd rather stay with the company than be lured away for a few bucks more or a few extra days off?
No, that's great. And I think that, how an organization can best kind of engage their employee, it really, it comes down to, an individual wants to be heard by and feel as if he or she has a voice with their, their direct reports, with their peers. So it's important to make sure that as a leader within a hospitality organization, you put in place, let's call it mechanisms, processes, if you will, or ways to make sure that you engage your employees, that you best do that, to best make sure that he or she's voice is heard. It's extremely crucial.
Right. All right. Well, that makes sense. Okay, Andrew. Now I think I'm feeling pretty good with all the answers that you gave me. And, it's so great to be talking to somebody, such as yourself to really teach us a little bit about, what people are thinking about when it comes to hiring and making sure that their companies are being as efficient and profitable as absolutely possible. So we've been talking with Andrew Hazelton, Managing Director of AETHOS Consulting Group. So Andrew, this is the most exciting time in the show. Time for your shameless plugs officially. How do we find you? How do we find Ethos? Hey, how do you even spell ethos?
Ethos, AETHOS Consulting Group. Once again, Glenn, really appreciate the platform. And as I open the dialogue, very fortunate, if you will, to kind of be in such a great people-driven environment, industry, if you will, with some great leaders. And I'm just happy to wake up every day, partner with those leaders and really help them drive positive change for their business and feel fortunate to do so. And once again, feel fortunate to be given the opportunity to talk with you today. Great.
Well, thanks, Andrew. This has been absolutely terrific. Throw out your website, please.
It's www.ethosconsultinggroup.com.
Easy enough. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for being here, and I want everybody else to stick around because after this commercial break, we have another terrific interview. And as you know, I don't know which one I'm going to run yet.
Glenn, I got it.
So, what's that?
I got to stop. Can you
go? All right, Andrew, throw me out that website. I got to know how to find you online.
It's www.ethoscgforconsultinggroup.com.
All right, ethoscg.com. Well, thanks so much for being here, Andrew, and to all of you all. I want you to stick around because after this commercial break, we've got another amazing interview. You're not going to want to miss it. Man, I really felt like that conversation was definitely pulsating with love and light. So thanks for listening. We'll be right back after this message.
Have a question for your host, Glenn? Tweet him now at Traveling Glenn. No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Glenn here. So a couple of months ago, I had Andy Alexander, he's the president of Red Roof, on this exact podcast. And we did it during the AETHOS conference. And let me tell you, I got to know a lot about the Red Roof team and the brand. For example, did you know Red Roof offers one of the highest RevPARs in the economy segment and has been #1 in online guest reviews 8 years running, according to Clarabridge? Well, they're careful to make sure standards reflect guest experiences, they're fully tested and well priced. In fact, they manage about 20% of the system, so they have skin in the game too. You know, a few years ago also, another great thing they did is they introduced Red Roof Plus, a brand extension that created the upscale economy segment, and it's a great product with wood-like flooring, high-end bedding, spa-inspired baths, enhanced landscaping, and more, all based on customer research. And it's having a dramatic effect on owners' financial results. I know when I first saw it, I was blown away by how much you could do in an economy place to make it seem extremely upscale. I guess that's where they got upscale economy from. So more recently, they introduced the Red Collection, which is an amazing group of unique hotels that are city-centric, but also inspired by the vibe and culture of the neighborhoods in which they're located. And that gives franchisees the opportunity to affordably invest in new markets with a brand that has a solid track record. But the most interesting thing I learned, all from Red Roof franchisees themselves. Again and again, they tell me, genuine relationships, real results. It isn't just a slogan, it's just how Red Roof operates. Learn more by visiting redrooffranchising.com or call 888-473-8861 and tell them Glenn sent you.
Back to the show. It's No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman.
All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the No Vacancy podcast. So I am particularly excited for this next interview. So, I'm talking to all the major CEOs of all the major hotel companies, all the big design companies, all the major players within the industry. Well, forget about that today. We're trying something different. We're here in the middle of the summer. I wanted to take a break, do something different, do something fun, and talk to some of those people that are staying in the hotels and what those experiences are like. So what better way than to find one of the country's top stand-up comedians, that Mr. Dan Cummins, who also happens to have a podcast, which we'll get to in a minute. Dan, welcome aboard the show. Super excited to have a guy of your caliber chatting with me today. Do you all of a sudden hate yourself and want to subject yourself to having to talk to me? What's the deal, Dan?
No, man. Thank you. I know. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having me on, man. I know that you are speaking of podcasts, everything like a BDM, and I'm very, very loyal to Tom and Dan with the Mediocre Time and to all their supporters. And yeah, so when Lindsay, my wife, said that there's a BDM with an awesome podcast and wants me on, it was a done deal.
That's awesome. Well, I happen to like Tom and Dan were great. I was on their show a couple of years ago before I started this version of the of the podcast. Really funny guys, really interesting guys. So you have your own show, which I think is a great way for us to get into this. It's a show called Timesuck, and I happen to particularly love it because I love podcasts, I love history, I love comedy. You seem to hit all of those things in one. Very interesting, very creative. Tell me a little bit about Timesuck with Dan Cummins.
Yeah, man, it's been a fun ride, Glenn. It's been, I started it, late September of 2016. So this September, I guess, will come up just on, 2 years.
Wow.
And, initially it was an idea that, people in my industry and in the stand-up comedy kind of world and comedy podcast world were not that interested in. They didn't think the concept was marketable. Why are people going to listen to one guy talk about historical kind of deep dives? And not every episode is historical, but just talk about one subject per episode. And I believe that I could make all these subjects interesting and fun and accessible. Cause I feel like, there's a lot of curious people out there who want to learn about everything from Roman history to, true crime. But a lot of times the presentation isn't that gripping for some people. If it's a more traditional academic presentation, that doesn't do it for everybody. Some people, they kind of tune out once it goes to that kind of NPR monotone delivery style, which is great for some people, but not for everybody. So I thought, well, what if I could make, the same, and some of the subjects are definitely more academic, and take those kind of academic subjects and give it a little bit more of like a blue collar kind of comedic spin. And not blue collar in the sense of the blue collar comedy tour, but just more like everyday kind of man accessibility, man and woman.
Yep.
And I started doing that, and it took off. And then I added my weird sense of humor to it, which seemed to help it. And now we got a huge listener base. And it's been such a fun ride to find, so many people are also interested in being curious and learning and evolving and kind of pushing themselves and being willing to talk to people with different, political ideologies or different, spiritual belief systems. Because I think the media right now really kind of pushes a lot of polarization of the liberals are different than the conservatives.
Yep.
And on and on and on. And, at the end of the day, we're just all trying to figure out the world around us.
Oh, Dan, you're
fun to do it.
Yeah, you're so right, because I find with politics it's all just become so antagonistic, and it's about one side winning as opposed to all of us coming together as Americans for the betterment of this country. It's so toxic, it's so exhausting. I can't really deal with it. That's why I love a podcast like Timesuck with Dan Cummins, because you take me out of that for a couple of hours. I don't have to worry about MSNBC or Fox News or all of this stuff infiltrating my brains for an hour. I could focus on really uplifting topics like the story of Jack the Ripper or the Green River Killer, So
right.
all of these great things.
Those were definitely really, really dark, I like to mix it up. I like to mix up the dark ones with maybe, I guess, even like a Joan of Arc story is dark. But what I like about like thrown in the historical ones is I truly believe that knowledge is power. And like, all the things that we're dealing with today in modern society, it really isn't that new. Like the essence of all the stories we're dealing with now, history really does repeat itself. And I feel like the more you can learn about people's lives, historical figures and just interesting moments in history, the better equipped you are to deal with just life in general, and when, like we just talked about politics, when some political issue comes up, you may not know that particular politician's background, but you understand the angle they're selling. You understand the big picture thing they're talking about because you've already learned about it time and time again through various, kind of historical lessons. So I really, that motivates me a little more to just try to spread as much kind of knowledge as possible, because the better informed we are, the better lives we're going to lead,
Yeah.
And serial killers are fun to learn about.
Oh, they really
There's
are.
a morbid fascination there. I don't know how redeeming those episodes are, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's for sure, Dan. I got to tell you, the Tupac and Biggie episode from last February really taught me a lot about today's politics. It's almost like the same kind of thing. Fame, money, murder, all of it together. And I should say, I was just turned on to Netflix, and I saw this new series called Dark Tourism, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but the second episode,
I heard about it.
The second episode, they talk about, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Aokigahara, Japan's suicide forest, which you did an episode on recently.
Yep, exactly.
And I'm like, oh, this guy's totally stealing Dan's lines here. I mean, it was crazy. Really,
but like even on an episode like that, what I like Tupac and Biggie, you're just learning about the biographies of like hip hop people, but then you could also learn through that episode about like elements of the crack epidemic that hit America in in the 80s and different things, and kind of how that affected society a little bit. And with the suicide forest, that was an interesting lesson to me about how differently one culture can view suicide than another. And then obviously that got a little bit into the history of the samurai with their tradition there, but it's just that reminder of what can be so taboo in one culture can be revered in another one. I just find that stuff fascinating. And like suicide, historically in Japan, so suicide seen as an honorable act.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing how you bring in all of that cultural aspect into the history, because it's so important for us to learn. And I think your episode specifically on the Aztec Empire, for example, with all of that human sacrifice, really put things into mind. I liked how you were, you're talking about how, the Europeans might have been bad, but these people were really into human sacrifice, and all we're doing is trying to paint a positive eye on it, when maybe that's not really the true story of what happened.
Yeah, it is funny how things shift, with whatever historian is kind of telling the tale. But I think, like there can be these, kind of revisionist movements where it's like, the Spanish conquistadors were terrible and how dare they exploit these people. And they did. And I'm not, and that's why I like that story. Is like, yeah, they did do a lot of terrible things, and they were terrible in a lot of ways. But you also learn that, the Aztec culture wasn't some noble, peaceful, wonderful culture. It's like they were continually butchering the members of the various tribes that inhabited the region around them in the most, horrific ways. Right. So it's like, it is funny. It's funny to me how, that those details get lost a lot of times because I feel like a lot of historians, just kind of like the media we're talking about, they lose track of being objective, and instead they want to like push a narrative to make their story sexier or something. So they want to push like, bad Europeans taking advantage of indigenous people, and then they leave all the details out that don't fit that narrative. kind of like how the media does that now, where it's like, this angle or whatever, or this group of, this demographic is terrible. And then they tell the story and they just fill it with details that fit, the story they want to tell. And I think that's what people like about Timesuck too, is I try really hard to be honest and to be as objective as I humanly can be.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that I did learn is I thought I was under a lot of pressure in high school being a virgin and all, but I would hate to have been a virgin in Aztec times. I mean, I was going to get my heart pulled out if,
Yeah, that boosted you up on the potential sacrifice list for sure.
Yeah. So, I want to know, how did you get into stand-up comedy? And to be honest with you, Dan, I was in an improv group when I was in college and a little out of college, but I was too self-conscious. I wasn't able to really be in the moment. I know, I wasn't very good with the yes and, because I was all up in my own head when it came to improv. Plus, we had one guy in the group that wound up becoming a superstar. You may know him as the star of King of Queens, and he was so over the top that it made me feel really insecure. Plus, honestly, Dan, my parents are too good to me and I wasn't damaged enough to be that funny. So, how did you get involved in stand-up comedy? What was that process like?
I always just liked creative expression. Some kind of, as a kid who doodled and messed around with, music a little bit, and always had kind of a healthy imagination. And then I really didn't. It wasn't a plan early on. I was more into music in college, but I did a little bit of sketch comedy, and then after I always liked Saturday Night Live, but I wasn't like a stand-up junkie or anything. And then really it was just I was doing a lot of soul searching the year after I graduated from college, and there was a lot of different possibilities I was looking at. Graphic design and going back into trying to get into teaching, going back to school, and then I heard about this open mic at a comedy club. And I guess what appealed to me about stand-up specifically is that you don't have to rely on a group to accomplish anything. It's like, as a kid, I hated working in groups because, right or wrong, I always felt like, I would get stuck with the lion's share of work, or they wouldn't want to do it the way I wanted to do it. I've always kind of been a creative control freak. Mm-hmm. And even when I was in the band, it's like, I was hesitant to accept, I guess, other band members' ideas. And I think stand-up just appealed to my temperament, where it's like, oh, okay, I get to make up whatever stories I want, real stories, fake stories. There's really very few rules other than just be funny, and then if that works, I don't have to worry about a band member potentially wanting to no longer do it and ruining the whole thing. Right. And so I just like the solo aspect of it, and I just like that creative process where, like with a song, you might have to work on a song for months or whatever, and then, you work on it in the studio and you record it, and then eventually you debut it. Or I guess you could debut it in your live show in some form, but it usually takes a long time from initial thoughts to letting other people hear it, to decide if they like it or not. But what I like about stand-up is the immediacy of it, where you can think of something or I can, think of something and often this has happened at 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and then I throw it out into a show and let a couple hundred people hear it that night at 8 o'clock. And when it works, I'm like, cool. Something I hadn't even thought of when I had breakfast this morning is now something that makes people laugh and, and brings entertainment to people. And I love just how quickly you can learn if something's funny or not. And what's the process? What's the process like, Dan, when you come up and you have those germs of an idea and you get them out for the first time? And even if it sucks, that doesn't mean that the joke doesn't have potential to be the best one you've ever written, right? So I'm curious as to what that process is like when you're on stage developing the material, because in my life, when I'm doing a lot of public speaking gigs, moderating panels, hosting keynote events at hotel companies and stuff, I try to bring the funny and I try to be spontaneous and in the moment, to always be listening to react to create those jokes. Sometimes they fall flat, but I know somewhere in there's an opportunity for me to pull it out in a different form later. Oh, sure. No, absolutely. I have the same thing where I think it comes with doing it, a number of years. Like initially, I feel like when I first started with stand-up, it's new. Your brain hasn't made the the new connections yet to kind of make this easier. You're at the very bottom of the learning curve. And, you know how you've made people laugh in your personal life before, but that doesn't necessarily translate to stage. And so, it takes several years to kind of find your voice. A lot of people say, 5 to 10 years of doing stand-up to really find a consistent voice on stage. And so initially you're throwing stuff all over the place. And there would be things that I thought was funny, but the crowd reacted so negatively that I would just kind of not try them again. But then sometimes those old ideas I would bring back literally a decade later and be like, oh, okay, now I know enough about what I'm doing to make that idea work.
Right.
And I do remember reading something in a book about comedy where like the really good comics can make any idea funny. Like a bad comic has to rely on inherently funny premises to kind of get laughs. But if you get far enough into your craft, you can take literally anything and you can find your angle on it to make it funny. And I think that's, after a while you reach that point. And then, like you said, just because something doesn't work that night, I don't think like, oh, that's a terrible idea. I just think, oh, I'm not bringing them into the idea the correct way. So I got to find a new angle.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I see this, and for all of you listeners out there, I see stand-up comedy really as a metaphor for all of our careers and what we're trying to achieve. That when you first start out, you really do suck, and you have to learn and figure out what your personal voice is, and then be able to translate in a way that connects with people, with that audience, whether it's your boss, whether it's your coworkers, whether it is people on stage or not. So how do you get through that early years of when you have no experience, so inherently you're going to wind up, getting booed off the stage and crashing, and you're not going to kill, except on the very rare occasion for those first number of years.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to be a stubborn person. You got to have, it's funny. My kids' schools now, they talk about perseverance, and I do wonder. Maybe I'm just getting older, and it's just a typical thing of being annoyed by the younger generation just irrationally. But sometimes I do wonder if the generation coming up has the same amount of perseverance and tenacity that maybe the few previous generations above them kind of had, because I don't know, I just see people want to like give up so quickly now, and part of me wonders if it's that instant famous kind of culture we live in where people can blow up on YouTube overnight and people can blow up on Instagram overnight, and reality shows make people stars overnight, where when I started I just kind of accepted that the path is that this is going to be painful for a while, and I'm going to have to pay a lot of dues, and it's going to be up and downs. But, I just felt like if there was more ups and downs, I'd stick with it. And I had, so many terrible shows, so many shows where the venue didn't like me, the crowd didn't like me, people didn't want to pay me. It went so bad. And that's not fun. That's really not fun.
It sounds like you're describing my experience of living in my house. So not stand-up comedy.
But I mean, to go, I mean, there's intimidating for people getting into stand up where it's like, yeah, there are going to be nights when you walk into a room where you don't know anybody, and then nobody there, cares about you. And 2 hours later, everyone in that room does know who you are, and none of them like you. And it's not like, they don't like your product. They don't like you as a human being.
Right.
Like, you disgust them, you bore them, which to me is almost worse than disgusting them. And there's no way of getting around that. That's just going to be painful. And that's why when people ask me about getting into stand-up now and they want a bunch of help before they've ever got on stage, I refuse to give it to them. It's like I'm not going to take a bunch of time and mentor somebody who hasn't even had the courage to get up there yet, and because I know that odds are probably 90% of the people who are thinking or more aren't going to survive the first few months. It's just going to be too painful for their ego. But if you can get through it, then you can, just like anything else, like you said, you can really do some great things. And I do think it applies to life in general. It's like the podcast we were talking about where, just earlier, where this has been painful. It's grown very successfully, but every week I have to learn some new skill, and that's never really fun, because you feel like an idiot. You're going to make mistakes. You're frustrated that you can't just do it immediately.
Right.
But I just find in life that people who are willing to push past that, early frustrating phase are generally pretty successful in life, no matter what business they're in. So you just gotta accept the bumps and bruises.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you, Dan, and I think that was what happened to me. I didn't have the fortitude and the inner strength to continue because I couldn't handle that sense of rejection. Maybe it was because I was raised an only child. Maybe it was because my parents were good to me, like I said before. But whatever it was, I didn't have that confidence in me to take all of that shit and then turn it into something that was positive and put it back out and learn from it and grow my skills and realize they don't hate me as a human being. They don't like the message that I'm giving them because it's my fault. I haven't learned the skill necessary to communicate with them the way that the paying customer deserves to be treated and spoken to, for example.
Right. All right, it's not for everybody. It's funny. Like some guys getting started, there's no way for this not to sound mean.
Yeah.
But like some guys, when they get started, it's like, yeah, the problem is their material. But other times, unfortunately, the problem really is them. And this isn't about like you at all. Like you sound like a very like well-adjusted person. But as we've learned in Timesuck, there's some terrible people out there, and sometimes those terrible people also think they can get into stand-up. And I've always found that interesting, where it's like they wonder why their message isn't working, and it's because, well, the audience knows that you're terrible. Like you're terrible. In addition to not being funny, you're a terrible person. Right. This isn't going to work for you.
Yeah, right. Nothing personal, but you're a horrible human being. I love that.
Well, every once in a while you see somebody, they'll say the worst things on stage, and then they'll have this kind of, almost like a catchline of, right, guys?
Yeah. And,
or right, everybody? And you can just tell the audience, like, no, not right. Right. We don't agree with what you're saying at all.
That's so true. So, Dan, as a stand-up comedian who's traveling around the country all the time, and you're going to be appearing between now and November pretty much everywhere. Dayton, Ohio, Tampa, Florida, West Palm Beach, it goes on and on. Chicago, Denver, Sunnyvale, California, Oxnard, California, Portland, Huntington Beach, Tacoma, it goes on and on and on. Check out dancummins.tv for the full schedule there. But, when you're traveling every single weekend, you've got to stay in hotels. And this is where we get to the bread and butter of this conversation, because I want to know what it's like.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, as a road warrior, what it's like traveling every single weekend. And then maybe we'll get into some specifics about hotel experiences that you have.
Kind of like, with stand-up, where in the beginning it's rough and then it gets better as time goes on. I have been lucky where, in the early years, of for a lot of years it was very sketchy accommodations. a lot of motels, a lot of smaller market motels, which is generally not good. When it's like, obviously there's become kind of this niche bed and breakfast kind of travel culture in the US, and like what do they call them, like I'm trying to think of like the term for kind of like a fancy little motel where they're really trying. They're really trying to give you like a unique.
Well, I see that the danger is when you go to those boutique hotels, right? Well, those are usually typically fancier now, but in the earlier days, I could totally see how you're staying at some of these properties. They don't have a hotel brand with them; they're independently owned and operated. And then it's a quality place when they say things like now with air conditioning and HBO. Right?
Exactly. I remember my ex-wife, she went out on the road with me early, which was a huge mistake because, I was willing to kind of stay in these places to pay my dues to kind of, do something I loved, creatively. Mm-hmm. But when you're just along for the ride and you're just seeing like, oh man, now in one moment we're in some horrible, trashy kind of roadhouse bar. It's very rough. There wouldn't be a normal place we go to. And then after that, we're going to this, motel where the rug is just, it doesn't look like it's been updated literally since the 1970s. It has those kind of colors and that long,
they still have shag carpet. You don't know how much blood from the bodies is seeped in there.
There we go. Yep. I stayed in a few motels with shag carpet long after shag carpet was in style, and it wasn't like a retro, fitting. It was the original.
Yeah.
And I stayed in places where I literally would sleep with all of my clothes on top of the blankets because I did not trust being, in the bed. Places, and I wouldn't walk barefoot in the room. And I'm not a germaphobe. It was just that gross. It was terrible. little roadside kind of motels. And then, but now I feel like kind of like I am, I guess, a very experienced traveler. I've been in all 50 states, and done and most of them many, many, many times, and many cities within them, and and a decent amount of international traveling as well. And I will say that the travel game has seemed to come up substantially. I mean, I know that there was always the 5-star places for those who could afford them, but now I feel like there's this class of business hotel out there. I'm a big fan of a lot of comedy clubs for like as you're kind of coming up in kind of that mid-range level. Like the Hampton Inn or Holiday Inn Express will be like a good kind of budget decision where they're able to secure a discount rate of, a lot of times like 100, sometimes less a night, in certain kind of smaller markets. Even if you don't have that kind of rate that they've established, directly with them, you can even just get it yourself for, under 130 in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
And you get like a really good experience. They'll have like a Hampton. I like that they do the fresh baked cookie, just little touches like that. So it smells good when you come in. They got nice desks, nice outlets. It's funny, all the little things when you're traveling that you really notice. I just want give me a room with plenty of outlets.
Right. Do you actually find rooms with plenty of outlets? Because I've been in the hotel business for 20 years. I keep complaining about this as much as I possibly can. Everybody laughs knowingly, right. And then I'm crawling under my desk trying to plug in my iPad.
I know. I think in the last year specifically, I've noticed that they've started adding a lot of like those lamps that will have the USB ports,
mm-hmm.
and the desk will have kind of like the built-in USB ports. Definitely, some chains. I don't want to disparage any chains, but there's some chains for sure that need some updating. And, and then others who have been really good. I actually just stayed in a Clarion hotel, which years ago I'd stayed in them and honestly wasn't that impressed. They had a good price point, but I didn't think they offered much. And then I stayed in one recently that was fantastic. Like really nice room, very modern, good restaurant, located on the hotel premises. And I was impressed. Now, I really do feel like that there's that business class of anywhere from 100 to 200 a night hotels that have become really, really nice.
Yeah, they really have. And, Dan, to just educate you a little bit, you're talking about the select service part of the business with the Hampton Inns and the Holiday Inn Expresses, and that's really the meat and potatoes of the industry right now, which is why you've seen such explosive growth with those types of hotels in there. They give you great, clean, comfortable rooms, typically a free breakfast, and they're really affordable to build, and they make the ownership groups a whole lot of cash because they're giving you what you just said is pretty much a fair exchange for what you get for your dollar. It's all about creating that sense of value for people.
Right. Well, they've done a good job. They've done a good job with it, and then obviously like there's the more kind of, I guess, resorts kind of level, which is fantastic. I mean, I've been lucky enough to stay in a lot of those, and that is that is a nice way to travel. Actually, when I was in Orlando just a few weeks ago, I stayed at one. I hadn't stayed at before. It's a local chain in Orlando. They have several. We stayed at Shingle Creek was the one.
I'm going to say you're talking about Rosen Hotels.
Yes, thank you. The Rosen Hotels. I was really impressed. My wife came along, and they had. I want to say that one had like 6 different restaurants on site, and they had, which I thought was an amazing idea for the ones who can pull it off because I haven't seen this very often. They had a 24-hour, essentially like a high-end 7-Eleven kind of little. Store where it wasn't just it wasn't just your typical concierge or whatever that's called, where you can buy like, a razor and deodorant and toothpaste and maybe a couple beverages and a couple like frozen pizza type, entrees. Yep. It was like a legit, lots of different options, little mini grocery store kind of vibe. And that alone really enhanced the experience. So
I like that you're saying that, Dan, because that happens to be another big trend right now. There's a lot of these hotels are starting to get rid of these 24-hour restaurants and even room service in exchange for more upscale grab-and-go places. So guys like you could come in late at night, get food that you feel comfortable with, and have all of those things that you want to purchase that makes sense. So I think it's pretty awesome that you're noticing these trends, even though you don't know the official, thing that they're trends because you're an outsider from the business, but you're experiencing them. And while we're talking about Rosen hotels, I encourage everyone to check back. Last year, I did an amazing podcast. I think it was of May 2017 with Harris Rosen. He's a true industry icon. You can learn all about his life and how much he gives back to the community. He's actually, Dan, given millions and millions to folks within the community to help rise up all of the city of Orlando through his success. It's a great story.
He did. That's really cool to hear. I mean, that Shingle Creek, he's killed it on that. I mean, that's been my only experience, but and all the little customer service details where I feel like, that to me is a big thing I noticed traveling around, because I feel like on the retail level and society in general, customer service has taken a huge dive the last decade, where, I'm sure some of that is wages. It's like maybe the people working there don't feel like they're getting paid enough, but also it's like I feel like it's a cultural thing where, kind of go back to not wanting to pay dues. There's a large amount of people who, haven't put themselves educationally in a position to get a better job, but still feel entitled to a better job, and so they're angry at work. And man, as a traveler, I encounter that all the time, where you just get so sick of feeling like you're bothering somebody when you're just asking them to do their job, or feeling like they don't care at all about you. And the customer service, specifically at Shingle Creek, just little things like, there was a lightning storm in the area, and we had reserved a cabana, and we didn't get to use it. And, some places would still like, okay, we'll give you a partial discount, or they might fight. Immediately like, oh, of course, no worries, no charges whatsoever. Sorry about the inconvenience. And then I think they actually gave us something on top of that.
Wow.
That stuff to me, immediately in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, when I'm coming through, this is where I'm coming back to. I'm going to come back to this place specifically. And, and like that little detail earlier, and I hope I am getting it correct. I've stayed in too many places, but I believe it is Hampton that gives you the warm cookies.
It's actually Doubletree.
Doubletree, that's it. Hampton has cookies, but they're not warm.
Right.
That's right. Hampton will set them out. You're right. Doubletree. Oh my gosh, thank you. Doubletree, that little touch. Well, I guess, I've done a horrible job of actually remembering, but if I would have been making a hotel reservation, I would have figured it out before I clicked buy. But it's such a little thing. It can't cost them all that much, to make those cookies. But when you've been traveling, you've had 2 or 3 flights, and, you've been 12 hours either on a plane or in an airport, and you've bounced around from a couple time zones, it makes a huge difference. Like little touches like that make a huge difference.
Well, it's great that you're saying that, Dan, because a lot of times in our industry, we think about like those great customer service stories, like, oh, somebody forgot medicine, so the guy ran to the, to a 24-hour CVS 4 hours away in the middle of the night in order to get somebody. But I think that for the day-to-day professionals, it's really about delivering on those small little things, creating those little moments that make you as a customer connect better with the experience of the hotel.
Oh yeah, just in business in general, and just little moments like, and this is flight. I guess this is in the hotel, but just for business in general, I fly a ton. I fly primarily on Delta. It's just the one that works the best for where I'm at.
Yeah, same here.
Airport wise. Okay, cool. Yeah, and they've been really good to me, and I've been dining with them for a while now, and like I think I'm literally just a few miles, like 10,000 away from the million mile thing, which is kind of cool / sad, that I fly now.
It's so true. It's great for cocktail party conversation, but really depressing when you think about all those miles, all those hours lost.
I know, all those flights, but we were, my wife and I were sitting there on a flight back we were in San Diego this last weekend. It's nice that she's able, because of the podcast, able to kind of travel with me, a fair amount now. And we're able to bring the kids and stuff,
awesome.
A fair amount. But like a previous, I think on the way down there had been a delay of 2 hours, 2.5 hours, some kind of mechanical delay. And then on our way back, one of the flight attendants took the time to hey, Mr. and Mrs. Cummins, we just want to, apologize on behalf of Delta for the flight delay, you experienced, back on Thursday. We pride ourselves. I mean, she did it in a really nice way. And just the fact that it was even said, I feel like most companies would not add that personal touch. And the fact that they did, again, just kind of reinforced my loyalty to that particular brand.
That's pretty cool. Makes sense. And you're diamond, so you're having a completely different experience than me. I'm platinum, so they'll throw me a Biscoff cookie and tell me to take a seat. But at least,
right.
And then one year I had diamond, and then because of the way it worked out, I wound up dropping back to gold, and I really felt like a pariah. Right. Both in the both at the airline and during cocktail parties when we start talking about status. It was very humbling. I got to tell you, Dan.
It is funny when you get, diamond, depending on what airport you're based, you get upgraded so often that you really do get spoiled, where I think for the first time in probably 20 flights, I had to sit in coach where I traveled for years. I traveled primarily in coach for many years, all over the place. And, and it was fine. But then now that I've had a taste of the other side and a big taste, going back there, it just felt like I was now an outcast. Like society had just shunned me.
Right.
And I hated it. I hated it so much.
Yeah. It's so sad. I mean, our poor first world problems that we have here.
Yeah. First world problems.
Goodness. So it's good to see that you're a Delta fan. I'm a big Delta fan too. So any good story that you have before we wrap up about any horrific, horrible, nightmarish hotel experience you had that you want to you want to share? I always love those kinds of things.
Oh yes, you will like this one then. Mm-hmm. This is a pretty bad one. It was less than 2 years into me doing stand-up. So this is back in 2000. 1 or 2002 at the very latest. I think it might have even been a year in it. Mm-hmm. But anyways, 2001, 2002, and I was, I decided to do this big Greyhound adventure, which was not fun. It was, long trips on the Greyhound where maybe it's gotten better at this time. It was not a real fun way to travel. Very, I would say, interesting characters on the bus with me. A lot of times when people get released from being incarcerated, right, they get a Greyhound ticket. So
I know I used to take the bus from Grand Central down to Atlantic City, so I know exactly the type of experience that you're going for here. Go on.
Okay. Yeah. So I did this, and like one of the last legs was this crazy trip from Tucson, Arizona, all the way to Grand Forks, North Dakota, which was over 40 hours on buses.
Oh,
and there was a bus exchange in Omaha, and I didn't even think it was possible for a bus to lose your luggage, and it is. They lost my luggage in Omaha. Went on the wrong bus when they did the exchange, and so I show up wearing clothes fit for Tucson, clothes that I've been wearing for 2 days now, and I show up in Grand Forks, and it was the time of year. It was like early fall, where it had been 90-something degrees in Tucson, but snowed, like they had a huge snowstorm in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So I get there, and it's, there's snow on the ground. I'm not prepared for anything. And then they put me in this hotel, and this is the worst hotel I've ever stayed at. Partially not his fault. It's no longer around anymore, I don't think. But it was called the Westward Ho. And it was
I remember that time.
Okay. Well, yeah, the Westward Ho there is like a big Western theme where, like an old kind of 19th century, Wild West theme originally. And it had been kind of like a mini convention center at one time where they had like a cool restaurant and bar and big pool area for the kids. A place that honestly probably peaked in the 70s or 80s,
right?
And then there was a huge flood in the late 90s or around 99, 2000, somewhere around there in Grand Forks, where a lot of the town got flooded, including this hotel. And so they condemned, or, until it was repaired, most of the hotel, including the restaurant. All the amenities were gone when I showed up. And I don't remember even like another guest. There was like one little wing of the hotel that was still open.
Wow.
It was on its last legs. It was, there was like no amenities. There was no place to get snacks, like nothing. And it was right maybe 2 blocks down from this sugar beet processing facility. And I don't know if you've ever been by one of those.
No, it's been a lifelong dream. So I'm a little hurt that you've been to one and I haven't been.
Well, you don't. Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, you think like, oh, sugar beets. like sometimes I eat like, sugar is nice.
Yeah.
Sugar tastes good, and I don't have any bad association with sugar. Well, however they process it, and I've been traveled by a few of these now over the years, it is the worst smell. And I don't even have a real powerful sense of smell, but it's so powerful when you're near it that until you acclimate, with me at least, I was literally dry heaving from the powerful stench. It felt like you were being poisoned. It was so toxic smelling. It's just so bad. So that is wafting in to my horrible little room, which is a room that had received some flood damage. So it just, you couldn't see the mold, but you were sure that it was there when you're staying in this little room. Again, no amenities, no modernization. And then across it was snowing. I didn't have my clothes with me. So, I didn't want to go someplace very far away to eat. There wasn't like a big taxi service kind of thing in Grand Forks. I was very poor getting into comedy.
I'm sure.
And there was only like one restaurant near. It was the, that I remember, it was a Chinese buffet across the street. And so after getting checked in and all that, I go have my first meal in this little area and I get food poisoning. And so now I'm horrifically sick in the hotel. I have a lot of bad things happening with my stomach. And I'm staying in this nasty, the floor, again, like it had like the shag-ish carpet. It was just nobody working there cared. They had zero amenities. It felt like there's probably like, mold all over in the room that you're going to get something sick. And just, it almost made me both never want to do comedy again and never want to travel again. Like, it was such a terrible experience.
All right. Well, this show has been brought to you by your favorite hotel company, right? Oh my God. That sounds absolutely horrible and horrific. So let's end on a good note though. What's the greatest, most incredible hotel that you've ever stayed at, if you're able to break it down to one? Because people ask me this question all the time, and it's really like the Sophie's choice of hotel experiences. I have a hard time doing it. But is there something that instantly pops to your head going, wow, I absolutely love this experience, this hotel, or these people?
Yeah, the one that just pops in my head randomly was the W in Times Square.
Mm-hmm.
That hotel, just, to be at Times Square is such a cool cultural experience. And that hotel is so modern and just kind of sleek looking, just very stylish. And those W mattresses, it's you don't want to get out of them. It's like you just want to lay there and you just want to just sleep. You just want to eat in bed. You want to get the room service, and you just want to stay in bed just endlessly. I mean, and it really isn't like for that kind of hotel, terribly expensive. It's one of those ones where you can find it for, if it's like an off night, you can find it for $200 a night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I've stayed in like higher end ones, but that one it was my first time in New York, so it just has kind of a nostalgic appeal.
Yeah, I could tell it was your first time in New York because you were being positive about Times Square. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I think Times Square is the scourge of the city. I can't stand it. I can't stand the people. I'm walking there. Everyone stops. Just they think they're the only ones in the world because they have to take pictures and the selfies, and it's just It's way too stressful for me. But
I'm sure.
Yeah, but I'm sure if I came to your hometown, I'd be like, wow, this place is amazing. How cool is that? But, at least you're close to Caroline's. Maybe you're performing over there. It's like a block away or something like that, right?
That time I was doing it was like I don't even remember the venue. It was some little like contest I'd won. And it was like the final. So I was able to bring my dad and my father-in-law at the time. So it was just a fun little trip. I truly don't even remember like what venue we ended up doing a show at. I just remember thinking like it was the first time I'd stayed in like a nicer hotel. Like I grew up in a little town in Idaho where, pretty poor family. And so for me, that was like, oh, cool. I want more of this. And I've stayed in a number of hotels like W's around the world and kind of stuff since. And I wish like the nicest one I've ever stayed in, just for what I like, I wish I could remember the name, but it was actually in South Africa. It was in Johannesburg, South Africa. And it was so nice. It was like you were in your own little suite, and this hotel was like part of a casino, so it had a huge casino, had a huge kind of food court of like actual nicer kind of little restaurants, and then it had, you know, the even more upscale bars and stuff within it. It was like a big complex.
Was it? It wasn't Sun City, was it?
Oh my gosh, I think it was Sun City.
I just remember I just remember during the apartheid days, I Ain't Gonna Stay in Sun City, that song. So that's the thing that makes me think of that. That's cool. That hotel.
I think that was it.
Believe it or not.
Wait. Yeah.
It was.
I think that was it.
Well, the Kirsners.
So random when I
yeah, the people who owned that hotel went on and they built the Atlantis in the Bahamas.
Oh, cool! I haven't been to that one. Actually, I have heard of that one.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
It's pretty cool, especially if you like paying $7 for a slice of pizza. It's super awesome. But they actually have the coolest water park out there. So if you ever have a chance to go down to Nassau, take the kids. They're gonna freaking love it. My kids absolutely love the Atlantis water park. It's so super cool.
Cool. I hope. I hope to get there one day. That's awesome.
All right. So, anything else you want to add before I start letting you do some shameless plugs here, Dan?
No. I think I would thanks for having me. I actually it's nice to talk to a fellow traveler and somebody who understands this life. And yeah, I had a lot of fun, man. You know, it's funny. Some people are like, man, how do you do this? But I actually really like traveling. You know, even after all these, you know, the years I've been doing it and traveling so much for work.
Yep.
I still look forward to. I mean, it keeps getting better and better. Airports keep getting nicer. Hotels keep getting nicer. Restaurants keep getting nicer. I like it.
Yeah, it sure does. I don't know if you're like me, but for me, every time I get back from a road trip, I'm like, I never want to travel again. And then going, you know, if I'm home, like, for a few weeks and I'm going to the airport is such torture. Right. And I don't want to do it. But then as soon as I get to the hotel, I'm like, there's nothing I would rather be doing with my life than this.
You got it all to yourself. Yep, it is nice. You get that. It's Glen time.
Yeah, but to be fair, I only feel that way after I get upgraded on a Delta flight. If I'm stuck in the back in the middle, maybe not so much. You know.
I know. I'm heading to Dayton this weekend, and I've already got upgrades on all my flights there and back, first class. So it's like, you know, that does make it a little sweeter when you're like, you know, you're going to get the good seats.
It sure does. It sure does. All right. And so, tell us a little bit about how people could find you, how they could connect with you, how they could come and support you at one of your shows.
Yeah, you know what? Timesuckpodcast.com is just the best way to link into the podcast, and you can listen to it on all the various, you know, podcast players from Spotify to Google Play to all the third-party apps, Apple, all that. And then just dancummins.tv is everything stand-up related. And I'm on social media. If you just Google Dan Cummins, or you Google, you know, Timesuck, you can find all the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, and find out where I'm going to be and my calendar. And yeah, I'm going to be all over the place this fall. So come to a show.
Excellent. I love it. And that's Dan Cummins, Cummins. And the latest episode of Timesuck, as we're recording this, is Spartacus, when gladiators attack Rome itself. I can't wait to hear that one. I'll be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to yet, but this afternoon I'm going to go out for a spiritual walkabout in my neighborhood here, and I'm going to be listening to your podcast. So I'm looking forward to that. And I want to thank all of you guys for listening, for Dan Cummins being here. And hey, listen, I'll be back next week unless I decide to give this all up and go stay in some, crappy third world type hotels and do stand-up comedy. All right. See you guys next week.
Thanks so much for listening to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman, online at rouse.media, on Twitter at Traveling Glenn, and on Facebook.com/Glenn.Hausman. We'll catch you next time.